Right, let's continue to look at issues around migrants in South Africa for further discussion. I'm joined by Advocate Simba Chitando, representing ZEP Holders Network, and Ferron Pedro, spokesperson for Karpowership Africa. Very good morning, afternoon to you both. Thank you for your time. Let's just speak on the back of Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi speaking to the strides that have been made when it comes to this passport syndicate. Just to hear your thoughts around it, starting with you, perhaps Advocate Chitando.
Thank you very much. Greetings to your audience. I heard what the minister said about the migration for the migration fraud, or the challenges that he's having with people who are illegally coming into the country. It is a challenge for the country. There's no doubt about that. As a lawyer, I always advocate for lawful migration, and I'm happy that at least the individuals that I'm representing in court, ZEP holders, are lawful in the country and do not form part of the syndicate that he's referring to, which he said is from the Horn of Africa.
Ferron, what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think the issue is wholly misdirected. It's another way of Home Affairs misdirecting its incapacity and the fact that the state has implemented austerity on all public services, including home affairs, which means that they're focusing on these passport syndicates, which of course are unlawful, and we don't endorse those. But the real issue is that most undocumented people in South Africa are born in South Africa, in the rural areas. They're not able to get their birth certificates, and that no undocumented migrant wants to be undocumented. For the most part, people find it incredibly difficult to live in South Africa without the documentation. They find it difficult to send their children to school. They find it difficult to get access to healthcare, with many migrants complaining about being turned away when they have, when they go to the hospital because they don't have the adequate documentation. So it's really a misdirection and another example of government scapegoating migrants to misdirect South Africans and people living in South Africa from the real issues, their own failures.
I see we have Dr. Janet Monakamwe, chairperson of the African Diaspora Workers, also joining us. A very good afternoon to you. Just weighing in on what Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi has been saying after the massive bust was made with the passport syndicate that has been underway. What are your thoughts around it?
Please come again. I missed the first part.
Yes, I was referring to the passport syndicate. A massive bust has occurred, and the Home Affairs Minister of South Africa has spoken to the strides that were made, congratulating those who managed to investigate and get hold. Okay, we appear to have some sort of audio problems with Dr. Monakamwe. I'm hoping that we will go back to her as we sort those problems out. But just going back to Advocate Chitando, we know that you have been, ensuring looking at focusing perhaps on the Zimbabwe exemption permits and visa issues, which are of huge concern. Now, I ask you the question around this passport syndicate because perhaps with the dates expiring and, I know you've gone to court to lobby this issue, hoping to get some sort of breakthrough here. Are there no concerns on your end that some Zimbabweans may fall victim or perhaps may be part of this passport syndicate in a desperate effort to stay in South Africa?
Thank you very much. In reply, I actually want to bolster what Dr. Pedro just said earlier, just after I had spoken. The challenge that ZEP holders are facing, and many migrants are facing, as Dr. mentioned, is that Home Affairs does make it very difficult for people to lawfully migrate into South Africa. In the case of ZEP holders, they have been frustrated by several administrative decisions, which we argue are unconstitutional. directed at frustrating migrants, in this case ZEP holders, who are trying and their best. They have followed the law to migrate lawfully into this country. And there's several, we made 2 court applications on an urgent basis. There is a main application right now to challenge the decision to terminate the ZEP. These are individuals who have lived in the country for years. The Zimbabwe dispensation began in 2009, and the minister said that the ZEP is a temporary measure, but the law that he's using, or that was used to give ZEP holders rights in this country, is a law that provides for permanent residency. At some stage, the government has to acknowledge that these individuals, these migrants, are part of South African society. They have children here. They have bought property here. They're not as a group of people that, as you rightly said, unless there's a decision in our favor by the 31st of December 2022, if there's no decision, then many of these people have to leave the country, because the rules now, there are many other decisions that are made, like the critical skills list. All of them, they've closed the application platforms for permanent residency. If you go online, you can't do it. There's several attempts made to hinder the progress of a migrant to become legal. And they're trying to force these migrants to become illegal and then treat them as the individuals that were forced into this syndicate. There may be criminality taking place there. I don't want to speak on the bust itself, but because I was not there, I don't know exactly what's going on. But what Doctor said is correct. These people, many migrants, do not want to be involved in illegal migration. They want to lawfully migrate. They have contributed to this community. They bought property. They have children. They're born here and deserve to be accepted into this African community legally.
Faron, I see you nodding as Advocate Chitando is speaking about the integration and, perhaps looking at the investment that has been made by foreign nationals, Zimbabweans, who have been in South Africa for an extensive period of time. I know that you are part of a group of people organizing the anti-xenophobia march, and that matter was also taken to court. I understand there have been some developments.
Yes, we're very pleased to say that our application to overturn the prohibition of our march has been won with costs. JMPD was acting blatantly illegally to deny us the right to protest. And we are simply planning a peaceful march of people born in South Africa, migrants, together to raise awareness of, firstly, the accuracy around some of these issues. We see politicians peddling, just blatant lies around how many migrants are in South Africa, how many are undocumented, how they contribute to the economy, linking migration with crime and social ill. Those are just, it's not true. Research shows that migration in South Africa has increased employment. We've seen that many of the negative stereotypes that get promulgated by politicians and people who are trying to, again, misdirect communities with real grievances, create this kind of sentiment, this xenophobic and hatred of our brothers and African brothers and sisters. So what we're trying to do, and we encourage everybody to join us tomorrow. We're starting at Hillbrow we're starting at Peter Roos Park tomorrow. We encourage all people who are interested in compassion, in justice, in fairness, and in truth to join us and mobilize against this hatred and opportunism from a small political elite.
I'd like to rope in Dr. Janet Munakamwe, chairperson of the African Diaspora Workers, who has perhaps has a clearer line. Dr. Munakamwe, very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. I hope we'll be able to hear you more clearly. The application on the March approval, what is your take on that?
We certainly welcome the decision by the court to lift up the prohibition, and it actually, in a way, kind of show us that the judiciary is still very much respecting the constitutional rights for all in South Africa, but also most importantly that it is actually independent of all this politics, because we strongly believe that this was the prohibition was part of the strategy to try and divert attention on the issues, particularly the rights of migrants in South Africa. And we totally welcome this particular new development.
Advocate Chitando, the rights of migrants in South Africa has been quite a topical one because there have been found to be aspects of the rights of migrants that seemingly are not understood even by some lawmakers.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I would like to also quickly thank Dr. Murakangwe and Dr. Pedro for organizing that march. Migrants in this country have a right, constitutional right, which is not understood by lawmakers to the full breadth of the Bill of Rights, which include the right to protest, the right to administrative action. And there is a perception out there that because you're a migrant, you're not entitled to full constitutional rights. And that is something that we've seen, not just in South Africa, but we are in South Africa, but it's been seen internationally. Migrants are people. They are entitled. They have human dignity. They have a right to life. They have a right to fair administrative decisions. And in this case, they also right to protest. And in this case, the rights of the right to legally migrate into this country have been frustrated by unjust administrative action, which is something that I've been asked to do to challenge what we believe is bad administrative decisions that frustrate the migrants' right to lawfully migrate to this country. But the two doctors, they're challenging not just that right, but from what I've gathered, the negative sentiment and rhetoric and hate that's prevailing from a very small populist group against migrants. And it's warming that there's a protest action that includes both South African nationals and migrants. You cannot distinguish the two. We're all family, and I want to disabuse the sentiment that South Africa is inherently a hateful country. I don't think that's the case at all. There are many South Africans who look at what this small populist group, whether it's Operation Dudula or whatever it is that they're calling themselves, and they're embarrassed by that. And I'm happy to see them stand up for migrants.
Ferron, what have you made of the tone of the organizers of Operation Dudula? Was that perhaps one of the reasons why you needed to have this march?
Yes. I mean, when we started, it was we were predominantly South Africans got together and were very concerned around the posts that we saw on social media, targeting migrants and really vicious language around and vicious rhetoric around migrants. And we linked up with migrant communities and all people that were fighting for social justice more broadly, because there's a general recognition that the problem is the policies that the ANC government has put in place, not only around migration, but also around austerity and privatization and liberalizing the economy, and policies that don't benefit the majority of people living in South Africa. And so people from various campaigns came together and said, well, they're trying to blame all the social ills on migrants. And that one won't solve the problem. Even if you kicked out all the migrants out of South Africa, that would make a tiny dent in the unemployment rate. right? There aren't enough migrants to take up all the jobs that people are complaining about that they have. So it's really a hateful and opportunistic use of the desperation and the sincere and legitimate grievances of working class people in our communities, and we find it incredibly distasteful, and we want to tell communities that it's true, you should fight for the right to housing, the right to electricity, the right to jobs and decent wages, but not at the expense of people that are not the cause of your problems. And we encourage people, everybody who's interested in that fight, a fight for justice and equality in South Africa, to join us tomorrow, because it's the same struggle.
Dr. Munakamwe, do you believe that there's no, perhaps, substance to the, a lot of the complaints that are on the ground when it comes to South Africans who may be complaining of foreign nationals taking their jobs? And, do you think that these complaints are not justified? I mean, Ferran Pedro here speaks about the fight for justice as opposed to labeling and pointing the finger at foreign nationals for some of the social ills and the socio-economic aspects and problems that South Africans are facing. Do you think that South Africans are not making sense and they have no leg to stand on when they raise these concerns?
Absolutely. I totally agree with Comrade Ferran there. It's totally, disheartening to get to learn that only today any African has to blame a fellow African for the poor service delivery, governance, high unemployment rate in South Africa. Yet we know very well that the constitutional democracy that came about was through concerted efforts by migrants. By then, I wouldn't get into the detail. But most importantly, it is very important to mention that there is a lack of history in terms of how this economy that today the Put South Africa First movement perceived to be their own economy in such a way that they want to close out borders, that it all came about the concerted effort from all African migrants who came to work in South Africa. I'm sure the president was so clear in his human rights speech. I wouldn't get into that. But basically, there's our research that we have conducted at Wits University, the African Center for Migration and Society, recently, it actually shows that there's a very small percentage, about less than 7% of migrant workers participating in the formal labor market, in such a way that one would wonder that if we were to make sure that all migrants are out of the economy today, will it really serve the day? Because currently we have a very shocking rate of unemployment in South Africa in general, over 50%. The former statistician general actually highlighted it yesterday. But also, most importantly, yesterday we understand that currently South Africa is hosting an investment conference. The Minister of Economic Development alluded to the fact of a huge shortage of critical skills, which also to some extent should be attracting investors to South Africa. The key question now is, how then do we attract investors and also blocking out migrant labor that is critical to our economy? We have noted all the policy reforms that have been introduced and gazetted recently, the national migration policy that also speaks to issues of quota. So all those particular issues will have to be taken into consideration when South Africans, those that put South Africa first, because I wouldn't want to call people according to nationality, because these are ghosts of Berlin, I don't believe in colonial borders, but the fact that there is some missing education that needs to happen in our communities to ensure that this scapegoating of migrants doesn't take place. I wouldn't get deeper into the issues around the undocumented migrants, because all we know is that migrants, all legitimate migrants would want to be documented. And Simba has done a good job around that. And we can't leave this platform without talking about how the institutionalized xenophobia through state-crafted policies and legislative frameworks make it impossible for everyone to be documented in South Africa. And the ZTP case is a very good case to actually give us some light around that, because we are more likely to have over 250,000 ZTP holders becoming undocumented come the 31st of December if this issue is not really articulated. And this will add on to the very burden that the Home Affairs has been complaining about. So basically there's a huge backlog when it comes to applications, whether work permits or asylum seeker permits, in such a way that even the Auditor General in 2019 was very concerned that the backlog that was at the asylum processing, application processing center would actually require at least 38 years for it to be actually, offloaded. So those are some of the critical issues that the Home Affairs would need to certainly look at in before we even talk about the Put South Africa First, whatever their demands, that no, it's actually the problem resides in the hands of the Department of Home Affairs.
Yes.
This is the message that all those who are actually rallying behind the Put South Africa First do not really understand the dynamics. Because as Comrade Sharon also highlighted earlier, that even South Africans in Bookbush Bridge, border towns, they are not even documented as well. And basically, or certainly they would really want to be documented.
Absolutely. Let's leave it there for now. That's all we have time for. Thank you for your time, Dr. Janet Monakamwe, Chairperson for the African Diaspora Workers Network, Advocate Simba Chitando, representing ZEP Holders Network, and as well as Veron Pedro, spokesperson for Kopanang Africa. Let me thank you for your time. And, of course, let's now take stock now of the very latest in the world of business. Kopano Gumbi will be coming up next with an update.